Good morning, students. Very good morning to all of you. Uh, in today's session, I will be taking you through uh, through various topics of Chapter 9. And Madam Ritu Chatwani, CA Ritu Chatwani would be there with me. And students, good morning, all of you, first of all. And good morning, Neha, Kiran, SK Sahu, Mohammed, S. Akif Mohammed, Devraji, then S.K. Sahu, Parth Rana, Harmisha, Ravina Khanna, Ajay Chauhan, then Ram Nivas, Nikita, then Sushil, Gunjan, Neha, Divya, Sankaran, Avni, Kadamri, Shubham, A. Gopi, Kalai Selvi, P. Kalai Selvi. So, students, welcome all of you. And today's topic we are going to focus on trusts and societies. Today, our major topic today would be trusts and societies. अब NGOs, चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट, तो डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स में हमने स्टडी मटेरियल में कवर किया है टॉपिक. तो स्टूडेंट्स, पेज नंबर 9.75 of the study material is you can go to page number 9.75 of the study material, that is audit of trusts and societies. So far as trusts and societies are there, अब इसमें बहुत सारे इंडिया के अंदर मैनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, आपने अपने आसपास भी देखा होगा सराउंडिंग्स में, कि मैनी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस आर वर्किंग फॉर से रिलीफ ऑफ द पुअर, relief to the poor. Then many NGOs in your surroundings may be there. They are non-government organizations and they are working for the public welfare, I should say. चैरिटेबल एक्टिविटीज में एंगेज्ड है. आपको सबको पता है कि चैरिटेबल क्या होता है. सो चैरिटेबल मैंने लास्ट लेक्चर में स्टूडेंट्स आपको थोड़ा बताया भी था, अगर आपको ध्यान में होगा. और मैंने आपको कहा था कि आप थोड़ा नोट डाउन कर लेना, सो दैट कि आपको जब हम चैरिटेबल करेंगे तो बड़ा कन्वीनियंट हो जाएगा हमारे लिए. सो वर्ड चैरिटेबल को इनकम टैक्स में सेक्शन 2 के अंदर डिफाइन किया है. क्लॉज 15 है स्टूडेंट्स. कैन यू शेयर द स्क्रीन मैडम?
Yes, sir.
मीनिंग ऑफ चैरिटेबल एक्टिविटीज, सेक्शन 215 क्लॉज 15 है ऑफ द इनकम टैक्स लॉ. चैरिटेबल एक्टिविटीज इंक्लूड, ये डेफिनेशन स्टूडेंट्स इंक्लूसिव है. चैरिटेबल एक्टिविटीज इंक्लूड लिखा है. जब भी इंक्लूड आता है तो इट मींस देयर आर, नाम बदलने से फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. अगर हम कोई डिफरेंट नाम से भी इसे बुलाएंगे लेकिन नेचर सेम होगी तो वो भी इंक्लूड होगा. और इसके अंदर और भी एक्टिविटीज आ सकती हैं जिसमें रिलीफ ऑफ द पुअर, देखो पहला पॉइंट यही है, रिलीफ ऑफ द पुअर. एजुकेशन इसमें कवर है स्टूडेंट्स. एजुकेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशंस का ऑडिट कैसे करना है वो एक सेपरेट टॉपिक हमने कवर किया है. देन मेडिकल रिलीफ, जैसे हॉस्पिटल मैंने आपको बताया था. देन एडवांसमेंट ऑफ एनी अदर ऑब्जेक्ट ऑफ पब्लिक जनरल पब्लिक यूटिलिटी एंड प्रिजर्वेशन ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट. ये तो इनकम टैक्स लॉ ने डिफाइन किया. इनकम टैक्स लॉ ने इसको इस तरह से डिफाइन किया है. तो ये बातें आपको हालांकि इनका कोई रेलेवेंस अभी, लेकिन मैं आपको एक ब्रॉडर मीनिंग बताना चाह रहा था कि इसका मीनिंग होता क्या है. तो इसमें बहुत सारी एक्टिविटीज जो आप सोच सकते हो वो चैरिटेबल में आती हैं, इस तरह की एक्टिविटीज. तो इसलिए ये इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन है. ये इसमें खाली जो लिखा हुआ है ये नहीं आएगा, इसमें और जो चीजें आप सोच पाए वो भी आ सकती हैं. तो इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन है. इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन मतलब का आप मीनिंग सबको, सबने लॉ पढ़ा है और दूसरे लॉज भी आप पढ़ रहे हो मेरे ख्याल से, तो इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन का मीनिंग आपको मालूम होना चाहिए। अगर नहीं मालूम तो आप समझ लो ध्यान से कि इंक्लूसिव डेफिनेशन, मैं दोबारा से बता रहा हूं कि जो लिखा है उसके अंदर उस तक रिस्ट्रिक्ट नहीं, इट इज नॉट ए रिस्ट्रिक्टिव डेफिनेशन। सो इसका ब्रॉड बेस्ड होता है, जो आप सोच सकते हो और एक्टिविटीज इस नेचर की वो भी इसमें फॉल करेंगी। तो दिस इज द आइडिया बिहाइंड। यू कैन मूव टू द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड। तो स्टूडेंट्स, थ्री बेसिक लीगल फॉर्म्स ऑफ चैरिटेबल एंटिटीज जो आप आसपास देखते हैं अपने, जो चैरिटेबल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन वर्क कर रही हैं, वो तीन डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स में आपको उनका जो लीगल कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है वो तीन डिफरेंट फॉर्म्स में एग्जिस्ट करती हैं। वन इज ट्रस्ट, लोग ट्रस्ट बनाते हैं पब्लिक ट्रस्ट एक्ट के अंदर, ये स्टेट लॉज के अंदर रजिस्टर होती हैं। स्टेट लॉज के अंदर ये बेसिकली आपका जो डिपार्टमेंट ऑफ रेवेन्यू होता है, जो, ये मैं आपको एग्जैक्ट बताता हूँ, रजिस्ट्रार रजिस्ट्रार ऑफ इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टीज जो है वहां पे जाके रजिस्टर होती हैं ये ट्रस्ट। रजिस्ट्रार ऑफ इमूवेबल प्रॉपर्टीज, जहां पे आप टाइटल डीड्स अपने घर की रजिस्ट्री वगैरह कराते हो, वहां पे ये सेपरेट रजिस्ट्रार होता है। रजिस्ट्रार उसको रजिस्टर करता है, रजिस्ट्रार ऑफ ट्रस्ट होता है। सो डिपार्टमेंट वही है, अगर आपको अप्रोच करना है ट्रस्ट के लिए तो आपको वहीं पे जाना पड़ता है, वहीं पे ही ये रजिस्टर होता है। लेकिन स्टेट लॉज में आपको बता रहा हूँ कि स्टेट में थोड़े डिफरेंट भी, डिपार्टमेंट जो बोल रहा हूँ मैं तो किसी एक पर्टिकुलर स्टेट के बारे में बोल रहा हूँ, लेकिन डिफरेंट स्टेट्स के अंदर डिफरेंट भी सेटअप हो सकते हैं। तो पब्लिक ट्रस्ट ट्रस्ट एक्ट एप्लीकेबल इन द रेलेवेंट स्टेट, और अदरवाइज इन पे इंडियन, दे आर गवर्न्ड बाय इंडियन ट्रस्ट एक्ट। एंड सोसाइटीज, सो फार एज सोसाइटीज, आप फिर सोसाइटी बना सकते हो। अब ट्रस्ट कैसे बनाओगे, क्वेश्चन आपके माइंड में जो घूम रहा है स्टूडेंट्स, आई नो द क्वेश्चन विच इज रनिंग इन योर माइंड, दैट इज हाउ हाउ डू आई फॉर्म ए ट्रस्ट। तो इसमें ट्रस्ट डीड लिखी जाती है, डिफरेंट मेंबर्स, इसमें कुछ स्टेट्स में 3 मेंबर्स मिनिमम होने चाहिए, कुछ स्टेट में जनरली 7 मेंबर्स, 9 मेंबर्स का क्राइटेरिया होता है, 7 to 9 मेंबर्स का। लेकिन कुछ स्टेट्स में 3 मेंबर्स से भी बन जाती है। तो ट्रस्टीज होते हैं इसमें, ऑथर ऑफ द ट्रस्ट होता है, ट्रस्टीज आर देयर, देन बेनिफिशियरीज, तो पब्लिक ट्रस्ट है तो पब्लिक ही बेनिफिशियरी होती है इसमें। तो बेसिकली मैं आपको ये समझाना चाह रहा हूँ कि ट्रस्ट डीड लिखी जाती है, और जो ट्रस्टीज होते हैं वो मैनेजर होते हैं इसके। आप आपके अभी समझने के लिए इतना बहुत है, आप इससे ज्यादा ना जाएं, बिकॉज आपको एक रजिस्ट्रेशन दिमाग में आपके चल रहा था तो मैंने एड्रेस किया है। सोसाइटीज की अगर मैं बात करूं तो सोसाइटीज जो चैरिटेबल एंटिटीज होती है वो सोसाइटीज भी रजिस्टर होती हैं। सोसाइटी रजिस्ट्रेशन एक्ट 1860, इसमें 7 मेंबर्स, अगेन ये स्टेट लॉज हैं, स्टेट के अंदर रजिस्टर होती हैं सोसाइटीज। जो रेलेवेंट स्टेट है उसके अंदर रजिस्ट्रार ऑफ फर्म्स एंड सोसाइटीज, जैसे मैंने आपको बताया था, तो रजिस्ट्रार ऑफ फर्म्स एंड सोसाइटीज इसको रजिस्टर करता है। तो इसमें 7 मेंबर्स की कंडीशन होती है, और अ, आपके डिटेल्ड इसमें बाई लॉज होते हैं, बाई लॉज ऑफ द सोसाइटी क्या होता है, बाई लॉज ऑफ द सोसाइटी लिखे जाते हैं, जिसमें इंटरनल रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस ऑफ द सोसाइटीज वो सारे लिख के उसको फिर रजिस्टर कराना पड़ता है सोसाइटी रजिस्ट्रेशन एक्ट के अंदर। और सेक्शन 8 कंपनीज, ये तो कंपनीज एक्ट में ही रजिस्टर होती है। दिस इज नॉन प्रॉफिट मेकिंग कंपनी, एनपीओ, नॉन प्रॉफिट कंपनी, तो सेक्शन 8 कंपनी बोलते हैं इसे हम। तो ये इसका एक ब्रॉडर स्ट्रक्चर होता है। अगर आपके दिमाग में ये आता है कोई चैरिटेबल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, तो स्टूडेंट्स, चैरिटेबल ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, उसका जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन होगा वो तीनों में से एक होगा कोई। तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है स्टूडेंट्स समझने के लिए। यस, यू कैन मूव टू द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड इफ एनी क्वेश्चन इज देयर, तो आई वुड लाइक टू आंसर। Yes, whatever I am speaking in Hindi, yes, 1, 2 students are saying to speak in English. So for your knowledge, students, whatever I am speaking in Hindi, I am also conveying, I am also speaking in English. So there is no problem at all. Whatever, rest assured, whatever I convey in Hindi, I speak in English also, because if you are unable to understand Hindi, you can then understand English also. Rest assured, students. Yes. So what you move to the previous slide, I convey in English also if there is. In Trust Act, students, in case of trusts, this is governed by the Public Trust Act, applicable in the relevant state will register the trust, and there is one trust deed. There is one trust deed which is registered. Trust deed is registered under the relevant state law. So these are basically governed by the relevant state in which you get the trust registered. And about societies, these are again formed in the relevant state where society exists. And registrar of firms and societies, you go to the registrar of firms and society, and they will register your society under Society Registration Act 1860. And Section 8 companies, so far as they are concerned, they are registered under the Companies Act 2013, and they are non-profit making companies. So this is what I have told maybe in Hindi earlier. So you can understand for your reference. This is in English. Yes, you can continue with the lecture, Ritu.
Thank you, sir, and good morning to all the students. So, sir has already conveyed you the legal forms of a charitable institution in very well detail. I just want to add two more acts to the charitable institution that are the common for all three types of constitution. That one will be the Income Tax Act 1961, and another is Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. If particular charitable institutions are receiving foreign contributions, so this act will also be applicable to them. And there are three constitutions for the same: trust, societies, and the Section 8 companies. Sir has already conveyed on the same. So I am moving forward. The topic is audit of trust and the societies. This is the now next topic will be after the constitution of the charitable institution. Now we are taking the what books of accounts charitable institutions as well as the religious institutions are required to maintain, and what is the responsibility of auditor on the same. So books of accounts will be the auditor is required to report. What is the responsibility of auditor? To report whether the trust, either in charitable or in the religious form, has maintained proper books of accounts. Now, what will be the books of accounts that are required to maintain by the trust? The first is cash book, ledger, journal, and copies of bills, whether machine numbered. That means there must be serially numbered bill, and the original bills and any other books that may be required to be maintained. So what are the books of accounts that are required to be maintained by the trust? First is cash book, another is ledger, third is general, and fourth is copies of bill that must be serially numbered, and original bills are required to be kept, and any other book that may be required to maintain in order to give true and fair view. This is basic point. What books of accounts are required to be maintained, and what is the auditor's responsibility on the same? The auditor is required to report whether trust has maintained these types of books of accounts or not. Is it clear? This is the common point. Voice. And now we are moving to next topic, that is financial statements of the trust. Financial statements, balance sheet, income and expenditure. Every year, the trust has to prepare the financial statements like balance sheet, income and expenditure. based on the books of accounts. Now, what are the books of accounts? We already covered in the previous slide. Second will be the format. In which format? The format for presentation and preparation of the financial statements is prescribed under the respective state laws. We already covered there are specific state laws like for the public trust, for the societies, there are respective state laws also. So these laws can prescribe the preparation and presentation of the financial statements in which they will be prepared and presented. So the presentation and the format will depend upon the respective state law, which is applicable to that entity. And the third point is charitable organizations are governed by different laws. We already covered, like in case of trust, in societies, and in case of Section 8 company, there are separate laws for the same. As well as the different forms. Different form can be in the form of hospitals, charitable institutions, NGOs, Section 8 companies. These can be different form of the organizations. Also necessitate the different accounting aspect. Again, the accounting aspect will be depend upon the respective state law. So what is the financial statements? Balance sheet, income, expenditure, and the format will depend upon the respective state law and different law for the different type of entity. Is it clear till now? We have covered the three aspects. The first was the constitution of the charitable institutions in the form of trust, in the form of society, and in the form of Section 8 company. And beside that, there were two other acts also, the Income Tax Act 1961 and another one was Foreign Contribution Act Regulation Act 2010. After that, we covered books of accounts which are required to be maintained by charitable institutions and religious institutions as well. And after that, the financial statement, what will be the, and what are the financial statements, how they will be presented. This These topics I have covered till now. So we are moving forward. Now, what is the auditor's responsibility for the same? For these charitable entities, what will be the auditor's main responsibility, special consideration, what auditor will pay attention on that? So the first and foremost, the auditor should obtain the list of books of accounts maintained by the trust, like it was cash book, ledgers, serially numbered copies of bills and original bills, and any other books of accounts maintained by the trust, which we have covered in this slide. So auditor will ask for the list, like whatever the books of accounts has been maintained by the trust. After getting the list, he should match with the requirement. What was the requirement? We covered in the previous slide. He will match with the requirement of maintaining the mandatory books of accounts. Whether the trust is maintaining ledgers or not, whether the trust is maintaining original copies of the bill or not, whether the bills are serially numbered or not. So the auditor in second step, the auditor will match with the requirement for maintaining mandatory books and record. First point was the auditor asked for the list, what is maintained with the trust. Second, he will match that list with the requirement for maintaining. What is maintained by the trust and what was required to be maintained by trust. This is the first and second point. The third point, the auditor should then verify. The third point, auditor will verify. In the first step, auditor asked for the list of the books of account. Second point, auditor match with the requirement as per the particular state law. Third, auditor will verify these record and books of accounts for its audit. He has to comply with the accounting standard. These are the common in the all audit. And a requirement of accounting standards on auditing that are mandatory by the ICAI for particular institution. The fourth point will be giving his report to the auditor. He will have to use the professional skill and expertise. Okay, he will ask all the necessary documents which are required in the course of audit. And he will apply the audit test in the circumstances. He will take the samples of the original bills and check with the other counter foils, if any, and considering the content of the audit report. The fifth point will be he will have to conduct the audit applying generally accepted audit procedure, GAP procedure, systematic procedure that are to be applied in every audit to give a standard form of audit report, which is applicable to for any other audit. These AS accounting standards on auditing given by the ICAI, and generally accepted audit procedures, audit tests. These are the common points which will require to be applied by auditor in every course of audit, whether in case of charitable or religious or any type of entity. So these will consider as the common points. He will have to apply the test check. Like I said, he will take some samples from the original bills, and depending upon the evaluation of internal control, I have incorporated a particular slide on the an internal control on and in the internal check we will be considering later on, and internal control procedure followed by the assessee. 7 point, the auditor will also have to keep in mind the concept of materiality. What is the materiality? Is that particular is that on a point significant to that entity or not? If the turnover is, say, in crores, so whether particular transactions of 100 rupees or 1000 rupees, is that particular or not? There is a detailed definition on materiality. I'm not going into detail. You have already covered in your chapter 1. So this can be in form of amount or other aspect also. This is not only restricted to amount. I have given just a simple example so that you can correlate. The materiality aspect will depend upon so many things. So I have just given a simple example so that you can understand very well. So auditor also keep to also mind about the materiality concept. He will not ignore this concept. The last point is he should keep detailed notes. What is the detailed notes? Audit documentation. Whatever information he is getting, whatever explanation he is asking from the charitable institutions, he will maintain whatever the evidence he is collecting during the course of audit. Auditor is required to maintain a documentation for the same. This is called the audit documentation, SA 230. SA 230 will be governing on the point number 8. So auditor should keep detailed notes about the evidence on which he has relied upon while conducting the audit, and also maintain his working papers SA 230. You will be covering in your later sections the detailed study of SA 230 audit documentation. What is in general I am explaining you. Audit documentation is basically during the course of audit, whatever information, whatever evidence, whatever explanations auditor is asking and requiring from the third party or from the management, from the trustees, etc. So he will keep all the notes in his working paper so that in later on any inquiry is being done, how you from the auditor, how you have given true and fair view for this entity. So in that case, auditor will show, look, I have obtained these kind of evidence, these kind of information and explanation. On that basis, I have given this kind of opinion on this entity. Is it clear till now? What is the books of accounts, financial statements, and the auditor's responsibility on the same? For acquiring the list of books of accounts matched with the requirement, mandatory requirement. Yes, okay. So I am moving forward. This was the auditor's responsibility on the audit of trust, whether charitable or religious. So I have incorporated a chart on the same. For the auditor's responsibility, obtain the list of books of accounts, match with the requirement that is mandatory by the state law or any other law. Verify that records comply with the ASN SA, standards on auditing and accounting standards. Use professional skills and expertise. Apply the audit test. Keep in mind the concept of materiality. Maintain all his working paper as per standard on auditing 230. GAP means generally accepted auditing procedures that the auditor will apply for the systematic approach of audit report. Is it clear? Generally accepted. These are common standard procedures to be applied in each type of entity. So we finished on the last topic was SA 230 audit documentation, the working papers. So the next point is connected to that only. Such working papers should include you will be covering in detail in your next session. For now, I am just briefing as per your present topic. Such working paper should include his notes on the following. What papers auditor will maintain in his audit documentation? If he is doing the audit of charitable institution, the first will be work done while conducting the audit, explanation and information if he is asking from another person or from the management, decisions on the various points, what decisions he has made during the course of audit, any judicial pronouncement, for example, there was any Supreme Court decision or any other declaration given by particular authority. So what was the judicial pronouncement relied upon by any case law, previous case law for any situation? So on which basis he has given particular opinion? Has he relied upon any judicial pronouncement, any court decision, Supreme Court decision, or any other announcement given by authority or not? Certificates issued by the client. These are basically information, whatever information auditor is asking from the management. So auditor will ask that in written form. Whatever information auditor is asking is getting from the management of that particular entity. So auditor will get that information in a written form. That written form is called the management letters, management representation, and written representation also. You will be covering in detail in your essay 580 written representation. I have given just a basic knowledge about that. Whatever information auditor will ask from the management, so this information will be asked in the written form, that is called the certificate issued by management in the form of management letter or written representation. You will be covering in detail in essay 580. Okay. Now the next point will be, it is important that the audit working paper prepared or obtained by the auditor provide the evidence. Now, whatever audit evidence, audit documentation has been maintained by auditor, what evidence they are providing. So the first evidence will be the opinion expressed. I have already explained you, whatever audit documentation auditor is maintaining is for the cross-checking with the opinion, whatever opinion auditor is making on the financial statements of particular entity. So opinion expressed by the auditor is based on the examination made by him. That opinion is not on the random basis. He has worked upon all the books of accounts. He has asked the necessary information if not required, if not getted by him in the books of accounts. He have asked for that information. He has applied the other audit procedures also. In short, he has not given a random opinion on that books of accounts of trust. He has done the proper examination on the books of accounts of that entity. So that audit documentation, that audit working papers will give evidence on the opinion that he has given proper opinion after proper examination. The second point will be, in arriving his opinion, the auditor has given due cognizance. Cognizance means after getting the detailed knowledge, whatever evidence, whatever information management has given to the auditor has applied his mind also, his professional skills also. He has gathered the full knowledge about that fact only after he has relied upon that. Cognizance means detailed knowledge about that particular fact or information. Given due cognizance to the information explanation given by the assessee, means by the trust or the management of that particular entity. And his opinion is not arbitrary. Arbitrary means not random. Second point is saying that what auditor's opinion was based only after getting the full detailed knowledge about the particular information provided by the management, and his opinion. His means auditor's opinions was not random, was not arbitrary. Arbitrary means was not random without considering any fact. That was not like that. And the third point, the information and explanation obtained were full and complete. Whatever he has asked during the course of audit, that all information provided to the auditor was full and complete as per the requirement of the auditor, so that he can express his opinion accordingly. The auditor has called for all the information and explanation which were necessary. As I told you, all the information required during the course of audit. All that information was provided to him, considered before arriving his opinion. The fourth point will be auditor did not merely rely upon the information. The same point is meaning of the all 4 points are same. The auditor did not merely rely. He did not believe the information provided by the management. He has applied his professional skill. He has applied other audit procedures also, so that he can check the reasonable, that information is reasonable, so that he can give his opinion on that. That information was accurate and complete. That was not incomplete. Is it clear till now? Cognizance means detailed knowledge about particular facts. And till now we have covered what is the constitution of the charitable institution. There can be 3 constitutions formed. After that, what books of accounts is required to maintain by the trust. After the financial information, financial statements, auditor's responsibility regarding the same, and what working papers are required to be maintained by the auditor, and what evidence that audit working papers are providing. Is it clear till now? Now we are moving to next point, that is what will auditor check during the course of audit of the trust. Whether the accounts, whatever books of accounts list we have read till now. So auditor will check whether the accounts are maintained regularly and in accordance with the provision of the applicable act. In case of trust, the particular state trust act will be leviable or Indian Trust Act will be levied. In case of society, particular societies act will be applicable. In case of Section 8 company, NPO Section 8 of the Companies Act 2013 will be applicable. So the auditor will check whether the accounts are maintained regularly and in accordance with the provision of the applicable act. Now we are comfortable in this particular term. What acts are applicable to the particular charitable entity? Besides that, there were 2 other acts also, the Income Tax Act 1961 and the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act 2008. In case where that particular trust is accepting the foreign contributions. So there were total 5 types of acts, which we covered in the second slide. And the particular rules of the same. We are reading the auditor, what will auditor ascertain during the course of audit. In that point, the first was accounts are as per the applicable act or not. Now we are moving to second point, whether receipts and disbursements, whatever receipts and payment are properly and correctly shown in the accounts and money received in form of donations is being applied. Now students, listen carefully. We have used this terms, so donation, so many times till now in the hospitals also. So what is the donation? There can be 2 types of donation. One will be the voluntary donation without any specific guide, without any specific act, and another will be specific donation. A specific donation, for example, one person has given the trust 1 lakh rupees and he has specified you clearly that these 1 lakh will be utilized for that purpose only. So these are called the specific donation. And voluntary means one person is giving the trust amounting rupees 1 lakh, and that this is upon the trust in what activities they will use this 1 lakh amount. So the first one type was voluntary donation, and the second is specific donation with the specific guideline given by the donors. And one is also anonymous donation, we will be covering later on, that is Gupta Dan, without giving the name of the donor, that is anonymous donation. So the second point is talking about the specific one. Read again. Whether receipts and disbursement are properly and correctly shown in the accounts and money received in the form of donations is being applied as per the object of the trust, as per the specific direction by the donor. Clear? In second point is talking about the specific donation. And as per the object, whatever object with that object on that particular trust was maintained. And the third point is whether the cash balance and vouchers in the custody of the manager or trustee on the date of audit were in agreement with the account. That means cash in hand that was actually with in the physical form, cash in hand is equals to cash in books of accounts. The physical cash found obtained by the auditor during the course of audit was equals to that was given in the books of accounts. Cash in hand actually physically was equals to books of accounts. This is the point number 3. Point number 4, whether all books, deeds, accounts, vouchers, other document records required by the auditor were produced. That means we are using the terms limitations, restrictions from the session 1 of this topic. So this is the point number 4. Whether there was any restrictions imposed upon the auditor during the course of audit. I had given you one example that auditor asked for the stock records of the entity, and that particular entity didn't give that records to the auditor. So what will mean for that this point? So this was the limitations, restrictions imposed upon that scope of the auditor. So the fourth point is regarding the same. All books, deeds, accounts, vouchers, records required, that was necessary, that was mandatory for the auditor to express his opinion on the books of accounts. Was that given to auditor or not? This is the point number 4. Point number 5 will be whether the register of movable, immovable properties we have covered in the case of audit of clubs, in the audit of hospitals, in the hotels. There are so many registers kept by particular entity for clearly segregation of particular sections. So in the trust also they maintain so many registers like in movable and immovable property. The changes therein are communicated from time to time to the regional office of particular that regional office in which area the trust is incorporated, is registered. And the defects inaccuracy mentioned in the previous audit report. Auditor, the first point in practical you will be doing. The first point of auditor will be to check the previous audit report. All the deficiency that was highlighted by the previous auditor, was this corrected in current year or not? This will be the duty of the auditor. Whether the manager or trustee or other person required by the auditor to appear before him. Again, auditor has asked for something to appear before him to ask any explanation from any person, that can be trustee or manager of that trust. Was that person appear before the auditor or not? Whether the manager, trustee, any other person required by the auditor to appear before him did so and furnish the necessary information required by him. For example, auditor has called one trustee to appear before him so that he can discuss on some points, but that trustee didn't appear before him. He didn't meet the auditor. So this will be the restriction. Auditor was not given the proper information that he was required during the course of audit. Next point will be whether any property, funds of the trust were applied for any object. One Vaishali has asked also, whatever the object of the trust, is it educational purpose, is it for in the form of hospitals? So what is the object for that particular trust is formed, so that object should be fulfilled accordingly. Purpose, is it educational purpose, is it for particular hospital, medical relief, poor to relief? We have read so many things that can be form of the charitable institutions. So what is the specific purpose for that entity? Is that fulfilling or not? The next point will be, I hope I have answered. So many students have asked what is the meaning of object for particular entity. Judicial pronouncement, Turaj, means judicial pronouncements means whether there was any previous case law, Supreme Court decisions or any directions particular given by the authorities or not. So that will be considered judicial pronouncement by the government, case law in the form of case laws, etc. the amount of outstanding more than 1 year, and the amount written off means bad debts that are not going to be recoverable by the trust. Is it clear till now? We have some more points left. Is it clear till now, students? We are reading the audit of trust. Now, what will be the points that are to be ascertained by the auditor during the course of audit of the trust? We are reading those points. Is it clear till now? Okay, I am moving forward. Whether any money of the public trust, as already covered by the sir, there can be two types of trust, public trust and private trust, has been invested contrary to the provision of the applicable act, which have come to the notice of the author. Author means who has given his property for creation of the trust. That is called the author. Sir has already explained the terms author, trustees in the case of trust. The author is who wants to transfer his property for creation of the trust. And second point will be all the cases of irregular, illegal, improper expenditure or other property belonging to the public trust. Okay, all the irregular, whatever the property which belongs to the public trust, or losses, waste of money, other property, whatever. This is the point. Understand carefully. This is much lengthy point. So, and understand carefully what is saying the point. The meaning of this point is whatever losses has incurred to the public trust. Was that loss incurred due to the trustees or any other person while the management of the trust? Was that loss due to misconduct of the trustee by violating the any provision of the trust? Is it clear? Whatever losses in any form, these are the various types of the losses: irregular, illegal, improper expenditure, failure, omission to recover the money. If trust was required to recover money from one person and it could not recover, so this will be the loss. And the other property belonging to public trust, or loss, waste of money, other property thereof, and whether such expenditure, failure, omission, loss, waste was caused in consequences of the breach of the trust or misapplication of any other misconduct on the part of trustee. So auditor is required to check if any loss has been incurred to loss, whether that loss, omission, illegal activities was on part of trustees. If so, he will take particular necessary action. The next point, the maximum and minimum number of trustees as explained in the initial part of the session, and the whether the meetings required to be held was regularly held by or not. The minute books is whatever the decisions has been taken in that particular meeting. So minute books have been maintained or not, whether any of the trustees have any interest and investment, like you have, if you have covered in your company's act, directors are not required to have any interest. So in the same way, trustees are also not required to have any interest in the investment of the trust, so that they can work independent mode, so that they can work for the trust in an independent mode. And next point is whether any trustee is a debtor or creditor, same, so that it would not affect the independence. Consequences means what will be the repercussions, what will be the outcome, what will be the situation if particular act has been done, completed. Outcome, output, you can say in simple language, consequences. Devendra Singh. The next point I have cleared you. Anonymous donations, there are three types of donation: voluntary, specific, and third one was anonymous, without any name, without disclosing the name of the donor. That is called the anonymous donation. Gupta Dan. Received are properly. Obviously, this is the most important points in case of trust, because the donor has not given their name. So how that particular anonymous donations are accounted for? and donations in cash and not received by the trust over and above a prescribed limit. You have already covered in a text session that what is the cash limit. In that limit, the trust is accepting the donations in cash mode, and beyond that, that is only by the banking mode. Next point, whether any irregularities pointed out by the auditor in the accounts of the previous year have been duly complied. I have already covered this point that auditor will check the previous year audit report. Okay, the auditor will check the previous year audit report, and any other special matters auditor need to highlight. He will highlight the same. Srinivasan, we have covered the what are the organization structure. There can be three types of constitutions of the trust. In the case of society, Section 8 company, or in the case of in under the Act of Indian Trust Act. So these are the legal forms of the trust. Is it mandatory? Yes, and whatever the list here is given, this is the mandatory list. I have already covered. These are required to be maintained by the charitable and religious institutions. These are the mandatory books of accounts required to maintain. Harish. Anmol, try to understand in a practical aspect. You will be able to learn as well. So I am moving to next topic. Same points related to the societies. There were three parts. Again, I am moving so that you can correlate. We have covered the trust section. What is the auditor's responsibility during the course of audit? The general points. And second, now we are moving to the society section. These are the general parts. You will be able to learn as well. Yes, and yours falls under the same category also, Rohan Kumar. Now the next is auditor's consideration during the course of the audit of the society. The auditor should ascertain the governing legislation of the society. We have already covered Societies Registration Act is there, and an applicable state law is also there, as in the case of trust. First will be applied by the particular state law. If there is not any specific state law for the same, then this Societies Registration Act 1860 will be applicable. So the auditor is required to ascertain what is the legislation applied to that society. The object, again, the covered in the charitable part, trust part. Object, what is the object for which society has been created? For the relief of the poor or the preservation of the environment, for education, for medical relief, whatever we have covered, an inclusive list of section 2 clause 15. So as per that, or any other public utility, for what is the object for that society. Now how the auditor will come to know? The auditor will check its memorandum or bylaws. Memorandum is for the company section, bylaws is applicable to the societies. Its activities and include charitable, social, cultural, education, as per the definition from which we started the session. So the next point is ascertain whether the society has obtained the registration under the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. In case of foreign contribution, students, now keep in mind this image. You can click and this will be shared with you. Keep in mind this image for this topic. You will get your 60 to 70% answers. All these questions you are asking. So here we have covered that foreign contribution regulation acts also be applicable in case any foreign contribution is received by that charitable institution entities. So this is the point related to that only. Ascertain whether society has obtained registration under Foreign Contribution Regulation Act 2010. In case of foreign contribution has received, now you will be able to link with that chart and able to retain also. The next point, ascertain whether it is also registered under the relevant. Also, again, the point from the chart, Income Tax Act. And the next point, obtain the understanding of the internal control. I have incorporated one slide. to design the audit procedure with a special reference to the donation and various expenditure in relation to achieve the objective of the society. Evaluate the appropriateness of the accounting policies with the special reference to the donations. Evaluate the accounting policy in relation to grants. And for example, AS12 is specifically given for the accounting of grant AS12. So auditor need to check that also whether the accounting has been done as per that accounting standard or not. In case some expenses incurred by society are reimbursed by the donors, for example, donor has promised to give 1 lakh rupees for giving books to the society, and society has incurred some expense on behalf of the donor, then donor is required to pay that amount to the society. The auditor is required to check the recognize in the financial statements. Is it clear point? A donor has promised to the society that I will be giving you 1 lakh rupees for the purchasing of books or for any particular activity. And on the basis of that promise, society has done some expenses. Now the donor is required to reimburse for that expenses to the society. Now, what is the responsibility of the auditor in this situation? Auditor is required to check how these recognized in the financial statements, whatever the amount has been reimbursed by the donor to the society, how this transaction has been reflected in the books of accounts of the society. This is the auditor's responsibility. You have to, the students, listen, you are required to understand the point and link it with the auditor's responsibility. You have understand the common point. Now link it. What is the auditor? What will the auditor do in this situation? In this way, you will be able to retain the points while understanding also. The next point, ascertain if any inquiry has been held by the registrar. Like in case of firms, there was registrars of firm. Remember? And in case of LLP and companies, there is the registrars of company. In the same way, for the societies, there is registrars of the society. So, if any inquiry has been held by the registrar under the applicable law in the working or financial condition of the society and implications for the auditor's opinion. Any inquiry has been made by the registrar from the society, then what answer has been given? Implications, whether that activity is impacting the opinion of the auditor or not. Next point, ascertain all the cases of irregularity. Same, was there in a loss to the society or any property belonging to the society, or loss or wastage of money or other property? Was there any case or not? So auditor need to check that as well. Ascertain whether such expenditure, waste caused in consequences or other misconduct was on part of the governing body. Like in case of trust, we read whether there was any loss, omission, and any loss to the property, was that incurred due to negligence of the trust. If yes, auditor was required to check with other audit procedure and to give his opinion accordingly. In the same way, this is the same point in the societies also. Ascertain the all losses and whether these losses was due to the negligence, misconduct of the governing body. Auditor is required to check that. Is it clear till now, students? Tell me. We have covered the constitutions, in what form the charitable institutions are registered. After that, we covered the books of accounts, financial statements of that charitable institutions, and general points regarding the audit which auditor will consider during the course of the audit of trust and the societies. These are the general points till now. You are required to keep in mind this chart, so you will be able to answer most of the questions. What are the acts? What are the common acts as well? Income Tax Act and the Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. Is it clear till now, students? Auditor will check all these aspects. Santosh, we have covered so many aspects. Auditor's responsibility and what will the auditor do? how the opinion will be based in the case of audit of trust and societies. Is it clear? Answer quickly. Yes. Okay. Srinivasan, you have to answer according to the question. In question, what type of entity question is asking? Is it charitable? Is it registered in the form of trust? Is it registered in the form of society, or is it registered as the under the Companies Act? So you have to answer the according to the constitution of the entity about which question is asking. Santosh, I couldn't understand your ma'am. Please say that auditors do, and we can say that this will go for it. So I am moving to next, the most important concept. You have already covered this in your earlier chapter, but I want to highlight because these terms are repeatedly used in the next topics. Difference between internal control and the internal check. You will find these words in so many types of entity for which you will be reading audit part. So internal control. What is the internal control? Internal control is a wider term. All the process. Listen now, all students, pay attention here. What is the meaning of internal control? You will be finding these words. So you are required to understand the difference between them. Internal controls are all the process implemented, designed, and maintained by particular management so that they can get a reasonable assurance that the overall objective of particular entity has been obtained. Overall objective. Internal controls are the process implemented, designed, and maintained by the management so that they can get an overall, a reasonable conclusion, reasonable assurance that the overall objective of particular entity are being obtained or not. And what is the internal check? Internal check is basically allocation, segregation of duties in such a way that work of one person is automatically checked by the another person. Like in case of you have seen, you if you have observed in the case of bank, we are required to submit a slip on the counter number 1. Then these slips are going to counter number 2 for the cross verification. Then there is a third person who will finally execute the transactions. So these are the example of the internal check. These are the segregation, allocation of the duties among the employees in such a way that work of one person is being automatically cross-checked by the another person. This is the internal check. And what is the internal control? All the processes implemented, maintained, designed by the management to obtain the reasonable assurance that all the objectives of the entities are being obtained or not. Is it clear? Now we are moving with this concept to the next topic. This is the important because you will be getting so many points you will be finding the word internal control, and in other topics internal checks. So interpret in that sense. Anonymous donations means the name of donor is not reflected to anybody. गुप्तदान नाम ही यही है, गुप्तदान. Now we are starting with the particular specific considerations. Yes, Rito. Internal check is part of internal control. Internal check is part of internal control. Internal control is wider term and internal check is the part of that. Is it clear? Can I move to next topic? The next topic is audit of charitable institutions. the specific consideration to be noted by the auditor. You have already covered in detail, I think, about the internal control there, which types of components are there. I think there is a confusion. Look, students, I am giving a brief about this concept, about the trust. Sir has already explained you. In case of trust, one, there is a concept, Devraj, I think Devraj has asked. Trust, when the trust is created, the basic terms is used. First is author, who wants to create the trust, who wants to transfer his property for particular object. Like for say example, educational purpose or medical relief purpose. So whatever his purpose. So he is transferring his assets for a particular purpose, and he is transferring his assets. He is delegating the responsibility of creating a trust to another person. Listen carefully, Devraj. If one person wants to register a trust, that person is called the author, who wants to transfer his assets for constituting a trust, and to those person he is transferring those assets for creation of trust, that persons are called the trustees, who are actually practically maintaining and using those funds in for the particular purpose. Those persons are called the trustees, and the author is the main person who wants to make a trust and who wants to transfer his assets for the purpose of the trust, for which objective he wants to make register the same. Is it clear, Devraj? Ruturaj, there are three types of constitution of the charitable. Ruturaj, listen. Charitable entities. What is the charitable entities? Who are forming a particular entity for the purpose of charity. Now, what can be the forms of charity? And there are so many examples: to relief to the poor, for preserving the environment, for spreading the education, and for any other public object. As we have covered in this society, this definition, there are so many types in which forms charitable activities can be done. Relief to poor, education, medical relief, advancement, any other general public utility, and preservation of environment. These are the general, inclusive list. These are the general list of charitable activities. Now, these charitable institutions, listen carefully, Rituraj. These charitable institutions can be in the three forms: in the form of trust, in the form of societies. They get themselves registered. They can get themselves registered in three forms: in the form of trust under the Trust Act, in the form of society under the Societies Act, and in the form of company under the Section A of the Companies Act 2013. Now, these particular entities are required to get its account audited according to that particular act in which they are registered. We are reading those. Is it clear, Ruturaj? So, charitable institution in the form of trust and charitable institutions in the form of societies and in the form of company. Okay. Now I am moving forward. So, we are reading what the auditor will check: spatial consideration. Now we are focusing on the spatial consideration while auditing the audit of the charitable institutions. The general points, the income aspect, what are the revenue for that particular charitable institutions, and expenditure. These are the common points. As an auditor point of view, you will be checking what are the constitution, what is the income source of that particular entity, what are the expenses, what are the assets, liabilities, how they are shown, is there particular, are they governing with the applicable provisions or not. So moving to the income part, what are the income and revenue? So the income for particular charitable institution can be the subscriptions and the donation. Again, there are three types of donations: anonymous, specific, and voluntary. Legacies. In last sessions, I have told you the legacies. Yes, Devraj, right. Perfect. The legacy is the amount donated by the way of will, wasiyat, and the grants which received by the charitable institutions from the various local authority and the government. These are the basically financial assistance given to that particular institution. Investment income could be in the form of interest and dividend, and rental income if charitable institution is giving his any property on rent. So this could be the income source for that entity. And special functions if any concert or any other activity has been organized in that premises of the charitable institution. So the income from the same. And income tax refund, uh, we have already covered in the last session the concept of TDS, tax deduction at source. For example, we will be covering in next point so that you don't get confused. Okay, Devraj. So the next general point. Now the starting with the what are the general points. First of all, now you all are now very much familiar with the concept of the constitution of the charitable institution. Now can anybody tell me? So she legacies means the amount donated by of a will. Wasiyat. If you have heard about the word wasiyat, that after that the will or the property of a deceased person is transferred to a particular charitable institution. Deceased person. Amount donated by way of a will, wasiyatnama. This is called the legacies. Is it clear, Sushi? Now, can anybody tell me what are the three types of constitution in which charitable entities are registered? I have repeated so many times. What are the three types of constitution in which charitable institution get themselves registered? I am moving forward. Meanwhile, you answered for the same. Studying the constitution under which the charitable institution has been set up. The next point, verify whether the institution is being managed in the manner contemplated. Contemplated means as considered, as given under the law, as given under the law in which it has been set up. Anybody can answer? What will be the types of constitution? The third point is examining the system of internal check. Is it clear now? Here is the word used, internal check. That means the work of one person is automatically checked by the another person. This is called the internal check. If one person, for example, in case of charitable institution, if one person is responsible for receiving the amount of donation and another person will be assigned the responsibility to issue the receipt, and there will be third person who will do the accounting for the same. The duties has been assigned in that way that work of one person is automatically checked by the another person. This is called the system of internal check. So auditor is required to examine the system of internal check, especially as regard to accounting of amount collected. I have given you example for the same. Yes, Anmol, Ruturaj. Yes, perfect. Shankaran, not LLP. These are the Section 8 companies. Not you can use the Companies Act. Yes, perfect. Jay Srinivasan, Shubham, perfect. All are understand. Very good. Perfect. So the first point in the general points was the constitution. Second was the as per the contemplated by the law. Whatever law has asked for that entity, the is that entity governing the same or not, applying the provision as per that act or not. Third one is the internal check, especially for the amount collected, because those are the main source. examining the trust deed. Trust deed in which a particular deed in case of trust, if that particular, understand here, if particular institution is registered in form of trust, then there will be a trust deed. That trust deed will be giving the all the manner in which the fund of the author will be applied. What is the manner in which money received from various sources will be applied? Who are the trustees? That is the trust deed in which all the information governing that particular trust through which the trust is registered, that is called the trust deed, and regulations as laid down in case of societies and other, what are the other regulations for the same. The auditor is required to check that. These are the general points. First was the constitution. This is the most important part because the constitution, on the basis of constitution there will be other points. According to that constitution only the auditor will apply the provisions of that respective act. Is it clear? Charitable institutions can be for the medical relief and the education purpose. So education purpose is one of the object of the charitable institution for which they are registered. Nagraju, I think. Okay. Auditor is required to ask a trust deed or whatever the regulations. The act is available to all, whether state act or the Indian act. So auditor can refer the same. And if there is any internal document like the agreement between them or trust deed, then auditor is required to ask from the management or the trustees. Okay. The next, now we are moving to the major part. What is the income portion of that particular institution? Subscriptions and the donations, again I am repeating, three form of donation: specific, voluntary, and the anonymous. Now what is the auditor required to check for the same? Auditor is required to check first the subscription point. There can be two types of subscription: annual subscriptions and the lifetime subscription. Lifetime means on the admission of a member has given the one lump sum amount, that is called the lifetime subscription. And another one is annual, per annum. So what the auditor will check in the point of subscription? Auditor will firstly check, is there any changes made in the amount of subscription? Is there any changes? Earlier there was a 5,000 rupees subscription amount. Example, I am taking only example. And now from the current year it is 6,000. So was there any change or not? So, and that change has been reflected, has been following by that trustees or not. And the second point will be the official receipts are issued. Now these are the 6 points on the same. The first point, understand students carefully, we are covering the audit of the charitable institutions, in which first we have covered the general part. The second, we are taking the revenue part of that particular charitable institution. In the revenue part, we are taking the first point, the revenue from subscriptions and the donations. Subscriptions can be of two type: annual subscription and lifetime subscription. And what auditor is required to check for the same, we are covering that. The first point, in the subscription, the auditor will check, was there any changes made in the amount of subscription? Earlier it was 1,000, now it is 2,000. So is that followed by that trust or that particular charitable institution or not? And second point, whether the official receipts are being issued or not. For that, auditor will check these 6 points, confirming that the adequate control is imposed over the unused receipts book. For example, there are 5 receipt book. If you have observed anywhere, there are pink color, yellow color receipts books under which there is a line over there that this donation is being covered under the 80G donation, something like that. So these are the receipts books. So auditor is required to check, is there any unused receipt book? For example, there were 5 receipt books for that institution, and for the particular current year only 4 has been used and 1 is empty. So what is the control over that unused receipt book? And second point, obtain all the receipts book covering under that particular period. Third point, test checking. Check, auditor is required to test check on the sampling basis. Auditor is required to check on the sampling basis with the counterfoils. In last session, I have told you what is the meaning of counterfoil. The carbon copy of the receipts. One is the given to the donor and another one is kept by that particular entity. So auditor is required to test check with the counterfoil with the cash book and any cancelled receipt book being specially looked into. For example, there was a receipt of rupees 2000 rupees and receipt was cut. Receipt was being used by a particular person, but this was not issued and this was shown as cancelled. That means charitable institution didn't receive that 2000 rupees. That receipt was cancelled. So auditor is required to inquire. Auditor is required to inquire why this receipt after being made was cancelled. What was the reason behind that? Clear? दिव्या कुमारी lump sum means एक साथ इकट्ठे in aggregate for the whole lifetime. The next point is obtaining the printed list of the subscriptions and the donations. Auditor is required to ask to the management, to the trustees, so that they can give them the printed list. They are required to maintain this all the list from whom they are getting the subscriptions and donations. Now, what will the auditor do with this printed list? Auditor will agree them with the total collections. For example, in that printed list, there are 100 names. 100 names from them, donations and subscriptions have been received during the year. Now, auditor is required whether all the amount collected from these 100 persons have been recorded or not. Fifth point will be examining the system of internal check. Again, there is a concept of internal check. Internal check, I'm repeating, the work of one person is being automatically cross-checked by the another person. Now read this point number E. Examining the system of internal check regarding the money received from box collections, whatever the boxes are being kept at various shops, dan peti, which are being kept at various shops and other activities, flag days, etc. And checking the amount received from representatives. Representatives means who are regularly indulged on whose shops those dan petis, those boxes are kept. So auditor is required to check how many boxes were placed on which shops or which places and whether all those persons who were representing those boxes, and auditor is required to check all the receipts are being collected or not. Read again. Examining the system of internal check regarding the money received from box collections, dan petis and all kept at the various shops or other places and other activities like flag days, and checking the amount received from representative. Representatives means who are representing those box on behalf of the charitable institutions with the corresponding official receipt issued, and paying special attention to the system of control exercised over collection. Say example, unused receipt books. Who has asked you? Avni. For example, there were 5 receipt books for that particular period, out of which only 4 receipt books. Receipt books means whatever the receipt we are giving to the donor is as a proof that you have donated this much amount to the institution. That is the receipt book. So, for example, there were 5 receipt books for the current year, out of which only 4 were used. So, 1 will be kept as unused. So, what control has been imposed over that unused, that is not being used in the current year, that is empty, that is not used? Is it clear, Avni? Flag days, Gaurav, are particular activities organized by the institution to collect the donation. These are the example of the activities. One of the example. Now understand E number point with the example. For example, there were 100 boxes, dan petis, placed at various places by the institution to collect the charity. 100 boxes has been placed at various places, shop, etc. by the charitable institution for collecting the charity. And those boxes were kept at shops. And the representative for those boxes were the shop owners. I am taking an example for the same point number E. Shop owners were the representative for the same. Now read this point. Examining the system of internal check regarding the money received. Now, whatever the money has been received in these boxes, we are talking about this. Whatever the amount has been received from these 100 boxes, so auditor is required to check the internal check regarding the money received from the box collection and the flag days. Flag days are basically a type of activity to collect the donations or charity from the various persons. And checking the amount received, whatever amount has been received from these boxes to the charitable institutions, from the representatives. Who were the representative? Shop owner. In our example, the shop owners were the representatives with the correspondence and the official receipts issued. What are the receipts have been issued by the owners to the donors, and cross check how many. For example, they have issued the 250 receipts, so amount must be collected for that 250 receipts. So cross check how many receipts have been issued for the same and how much amount has been collected for the same. Auditor is required to cross check. And paying the special attention to the system of control exercised over the collections and step. For example, 100 boxes were placed, but only 95 representative has given the amount collected on the same. What about the 5 persons, representatives, shop owners who didn't give the money to the charitable institution which was required to be given by them? So what is the step taken to ensure that all collections have been made and accounted for? If not collected, then what are the steps applied by the charitable institutions? Verify the total subscription and donation received with published figure. If any magazine, if any patrika types is being published in the form of from the charitable institution, then auditor is required to cross check the same amount with the figures published. If any reports is being published by the entity. Is it clear till now, students? Especially, there is no specific law for the same. This is according to the transactions. They can get them print, but they have to just keep in mind the serial number for the receipt books. There is no such legally requirement that for the number. Is it clear, Vaishali? Devraj, receipt means I have donated the amount of 1000 for a particular charitable institution, and in that behalf, I am getting a receipt that yes, I have donated the same amount. That is a receipt as a proof that I have given donation to a particular entity. That is called the receipt. Gaurav, I have given so lengthy example on the same. What is the internal check? That auditor is required to check there how many numbers and where box were placed and who were the representatives, and is there any mediator to cross check the same, who are issuing the receipts books, how many numbers from which serial number to which serial number receipts have been issued to them, and is the charitable institution getting amount according to that issued receipts or not. These are the types of internal check. Okay, can we move forward? Is it clear till now? I am not getting any other query on the same. So I am again repeating, we are reading the audit of charitable. Students, pay attention here now. We are studying the topic audit of the charitable institutions. In that, firstly, we covered the general points in that. In second, we are covering the revenue part. In that revenue part, we have covered till now the point number 1 regarding subscription and the donations. What special consideration auditor will put in the audit of the subscription and donation part of the charitable institution. All these points you can get a direct question on the same. What special audit consideration auditor is required to place while auditing the subscription and donation part? So you are required to write this. Now, for I have explained with the examples and with the detailed explanation to you. But for the easy understanding and retaining in your mind, I have created this chart. You can use this. For the second point, I have created this chart for the second point. The second point was the official receipts. What is the special consideration for the auditing of official receipts that are being used by the entity? Saipa, this is the case of cancelled receipt. If I wanted to give some donation, but later on I didn't give Saipa. I think Saipa has asked it. I wanted to give the donation of 2000 rupees, but later on I cancelled to give them. I didn't give that donation to the institution. Then this will covered under the cancelled receipt. I was about to give, but I didn't give that. So this will be considered as cancelled receipt. Now auditor has to pay special attention why this receipt was cancelled. When one donor was about to give the donation to the institution, then why it was cancelled? Was there any general issue or any other point? So I have covered this second number point in the chart format about the official receipts. So auditor is required to obtain all the receipts books covering the period. I have arranged in the systematic manner, obtaining all the receipts books covering the period. For example, particular year 23-24, if we are doing auditor for the particular year 23-24. So first of all, our step will be together to obtain all the receipts book. In our example, there were 5 receipts books.
Ritu madam.
Yes, sir.
One
Yes,
student
sir.
is asking that where can I find the bylaws of the society? Devinder Singh is asking this question.
Okay.
Did you answer the question or the question is still unanswered?
Yes, sir. I answered, I think Devendra, I didn't remember the name, but I answered if there is a particular act for the same, you can get the provisions of the act accordingly. But if there is a particular internal like trust deed or other agreement among them, so auditor is required to ask from the management of the trustees for the same. And particular act is available for the auditor.
He's saying where can I find out the bylaws of the society?
Okay.
So bylaws of the society, Devinder Singh, are available on the site of the MCA, Ministry of Company Affairs. So if you go to Google and put their bylaws of society, so you will get the bylaws of the society in the website of Ministry of Company Affairs, right? तो bylaws किसी भी सोसाइटी के आप लेना प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, आप गूगल से सर्च कर सकते हैं या फिर बुक्स आती हैं, मॉडल बुक्स भी आती हैं जिसमें बायलॉज वगैरह लिखे होते हैं. तो अभी एज ए स्टूडेंट आपको उनकी जरूरत नहीं होती है. यस, यू कैन कंटिन्यू.
Yes. As an auditor, you cannot ask for a particular acts from the management, from the who is appointing you. You are required, auditor is assumed to have knowledge about the act for that an act which is applicable to that entity for which auditor is doing the audit. Is it clear? Unused receipt. Sushil, I have answered the same 2-3 times. Unused receipts, I am covering it again in the shape in this diagram. And now pay attention, please. All the students are required to pay attention here. I will be answering all your queries. First, we are covering the subscription and donation part. Point number 2. what audit procedure auditor is required to impose over the audit of official receipts of the charitable institutions. So first point, I have rearranged the same so that you can learn as well. First point, the auditor will be asked for the official receipts book. He will obtain all the receipts book covering the period. In our example, we have assumed there were 5 receipts books maintained by the charitable institution. There were 5 receipts book. Now, what is the receipt book? There is a proof that I have given, donor has given donation to the institution. The one copy of that particular receipt is issued to the donor, and the another carbon copy is being kept by the that particular institution. This is the receipt. Receipt is going to be the receipt, proof of the payment. So in our example, there were 5 receipts books. Second step, auditor will test check. Auditor will check this on the sampling basis, the counterfoils, the receipt, carbon copy of that particular receipts with the cash book. All the receipts, all the donations which have been issued, which have been received by the institution, are they all posted in the cash book or not? This will be the second point of the auditor. First, the auditor will obtain the receipts books covering the period. In our example, we have assumed 5 receipts books were there. Auditor, second point, the auditor will test check the counterfoils, the carbon copy of that receipt with the cash book, whether all the receipts have been posted clearly or not in the cash book. Third point, adequate control is imposed over unused receipts book. Obtained 5 but used in current year only 4. So how many how many receipts books are being unused? One receipt book. One receipt book that was empty, that was not used by the institution. So what will the auditor check? Auditor will check whether adequate control was imposed over that unused receipt book or not. This is the auditor's responsibility. Check the sequence. The official receipts are issued. Auditor will obtain all the receipts book. He will test check with the counterfoils with the cash book and adequate control over the unused receipt book. Second point for the subscriptions and donation was auditor will ask for the printed list. If that institution is maintaining a list, for example, 100 subscriptions and donations were received during the year, so auditor will get the list. What will he do after getting the list? He will match that list with the amount collected. He will check 100, there are 100 names who gave the donation subscriptions to the particular entity, whether all those have all those amount have been collected in the books of accounts of entity or not. Third point, total subscriptions and donation received, whatever the receiving part. Auditor will verify with the figures published. If any report is being published, any magazines or any patrika is being published by that particular charitable institutions, so auditor will cross verify with that also. So first of all, with the receipts books, subscription and donations parts we are covering. So there are 3 points majorly. First from the receipts book, second from the printed list, and third from the if any patrika or magazine or any figures has been published by that entity. So auditor will cross check with them also. This was the point number second from the subscription and donations part in the revenue. The first was the subscription and donations part, and another was the official receipt. Third is the legacies. Legacies I have covered so many times, the amount donated by way of will, वसीयत की तरह से. So what is the auditor's responsibility for the amount collected by will? Verify the amount received by reference to the correspondence with any figure and available to that available information. Auditor is required to ask from whom this legacy has been given to charitable institution. Is there any proof for the same or not? Is there any published figure for the same or not? So auditor will cross check this legacies amount with the whatever the available information from that entity. Fourth point, financial Avani, controls are not implemented by the auditor. These are implemented, internal controls are being implemented by the management. Auditor is required to check them. Auditor's responsibility is only to check whether these are operating or not, efficient or not, as required by the an entity or not. Auditor's responsibility to that extent only, not for the maintaining. The fourth point is grant. Grant is basically the financial assistance so that the charitable entities run properly without any financial constraints. Those are the grants. So auditor is required to check vouching the amount received with the relevant correspondence and receipt and the minutes book. Minutes books we are covering. We have covered already. Meeting the whatever the decision, whatever the discussions were made during the meeting of the management members. So auditor is required to cross check the amount received, grant received amount from the minutes book. And second point, the obtaining the certificate from the responsible official showing the amount of grant. This is again a kind of management representation letter. Auditor is required to gain a written letter from the management, from the official, responsible official, that yes, you have accounted for the 5 lakh amount in your books and you have received the 5 lakh amount. Is it clear? 5 lakh charitable institution has received the 5 lakh amount. Yes, Anmol, perfect. Charitable institution has received only 5 lakh amount for as a grant, and they have accounted for the 5 lakh also. So this 5 lakh amount as a proof that they have received only 5 lakh. So auditor is required to take a certificate that they have received the 5 lakh only and they have accounted for the 5 lakh accordingly. First, investment income. Investment income can be in form of dividend or interest. Vouching the amount received with the dividend and the interest counterfoils. Checking the calculation, like these are the form of audit procedure, recalculations, observing, etc. So checking the calculations of the interest received on the securities bearing fixed rates. Example, if there is FDR is made at the rate 5%, so in the accounts they have accounted for the accordingly. On the 1 lakh they have recorded the income at the rate 5%. So auditor is required to recalculate the amount of income. Checking the appropriate dividend has been received or not. Comparing the amount of dividend received with the schedule of investment, and a special inquiry if any investment held for which no dividend has been received. Again, the auditor will break. Okay, we will be giving break after this topic. Please pay attention here. Compare. Auditor will ask for the investment register for the same. We have already covered in the case of hospitals, in the clubs and other section also. Auditor will ask for the investment register. Then he will check what kind of investment has been made by the charitable institution and whether the income on that investment has been recorded properly or not. Sixth point will be rent. If there is any rental income, if the charitable institution has given some shops or some offices to on the rent, so auditor is required to check the rent roll. Rent roll is rent register in which all the details of the tenant has been given. Rent roll is basically rent register.
Ritu madam, you can take break also.
Yes, sir. I will
For
be
5 to
giving.
10 minutes, you can take break.
Okay. 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 There will be 10 minutes break or 5 minutes. We will be continuing after that. The next point which we are covering, we are studying the audit of the charitable institutions. In the first point, we covered the general point. Second was revenue part. In the revenue point, there was first was the subscription and donation and the official receipts, then legacies and donation, grants, investment income, and the another one is rent. Join fast. The rent point. Now, what is the auditor's responsibility regarding the rental income generated to charitable institutions? So, auditor will first of all examine the rent roll. Rent roll here means the rent register. Yes, okay, Devraj. Examining the rent roll. Rent roll is basically rent register in which all the details of the tenants have been given. What is the due date for the rent receivables? All these are given in the rent roll and rent register. That means rent register. Auditor is required to inspect. Inspect means to check with the particular document. Inspecting, examining, inspect the tenancy agreement. Tenancy agreement also called the rent agreement. So auditor is required to examine the rent register and inspect with the tenancy agreement and the amount of rent, what is the due dates, all these will be inquired by the examined by the auditor. All these information will be available in the rent register. Auditor is required to examine the rent register to get the overall knowledge about the rental income of that particular charitable institutions. For example, there are 10 parties to whom rent and a property has been rented. 10 parties. So auditor is required to check the rent register and whether all the rental income on the particular due dates have been accounted for or not. Auditor is required to check that. The second point in the rental income will be vouching the rent on the rent roll from the counterfoils. Again, these are the common point. Auditor is required to check with the carbon receipt copy of the receipts of book and checking the cash book whether all rent which are required to be collected to be received by the charitable institution that have been received and accounted for properly or not. Clear? Rental. This was regarding the rental income. We are studying the audit of charitable institutions. First of all, we covered the general points. What is the constitution, internal check, trust deeds and regulation, etc. Second point is the income and revenue part. Presently, we are doing this income and revenue. Till now, we covered the subscriptions and donations, legacies, grants, investment income, and rental income. Till now, we have covered what the special considerations auditor is required to see, to check whether to check during the course of the audit of charitable institutions. Till now, we have covered till rent agreement, rental income. Next, we are moving to special functions. If there is any concert, dramatical performance, or any sports event organized by the charitable institution, so what is the auditor's responsibility on the same? Vouch the gross receipts and outgoing in the respect of any special event. Special events can be in the form of concert, dramatical performance, or any sports event also held in the aid. Aid matlab help karna. In for the helping the charity with such vouchers and cash statement. Understand carefully. All the students pay attention here. Auditor is required to vouch all the whatever gross receipts and out expenditure that has been incurred over these concerts, all these special functions have been properly accounted in the cash statement or not, with the counterfoils of the same, with the vouchers of the same. Auditor is required to cross check all these income with the particular vouchers. Second point, in particular, verifying the proceeds, all the tickets that were given for giving entry. For example, there was a concert held by the charitable institution. Why? To help the charitable institution in the charity, in the giving the charity. This is the main objective for the charitable institution, to help to do the charity. So auditor is required to check if was there any special event organized by that institution or not. If yes, what how the particular gross receipts and expenditure was recorded, Was there any tickets issued? Was there any ticket system? If yes, how the proceeds of the tickets were issued and have been accounted for. So this is the responsibility of auditor in the case of a special event if organized by particular that charitable institution. Auditor will require to check these 2 points in the chain. The next point in the revenue part is income tax refund. We have already covered the TDS part in our earlier session. TDS is tax deduction at source. For example, charitable institution has made 1 lakh FDR with the bank and the bank deducted the tax TDS on the same. So whether the charitable institution has claimed the TDS deducted by filing a return or not, this is the responsibility of auditor to cross check. Now how will he cross check? Now read it carefully. Where the income tax has been deducted, that means at source, that means tax deducted at source, TDS. You will be studying in detail in your taxation part. TDS, whatever the TDS was deducted from the investment, from the FDR. In our example, there was an investment was in the form of FDR. It should be seen by the auditor that refund thereof have been obtained. Now, how practically institution or any entity will get the refund for the TDS deducted? That entity has to file the income tax return. By filing the income tax return, the that entity can get obtain the TDS deducted. That entity is required to file the income tax return. So obtained since the charitable institution is exempt from payment of income tax. This will involve vouching the income tax refund with the correspondence with the income tax department. There is a site for income tax department. The auditor will be required to log in on the same or ask the management to log in, and he will be checking with the 26 AS. There is a form online mode. All this is on online mode. 26 AS auditor will check that how much TDS was deducted for that particular charitable institution, whether the institution has filed the return to claim the same or not, and what is the amount on the official website of the income tax website of the TDS deducted, and checking the calculations of the repayments of the claim, whether those TDS were claimed and how practically these are claimed by filing the ITR, income tax returns. So auditor will cross check the same. If there was any TDS tax deducted at source, was there any tax deducted from a particular bank or not? Whether if yes, there was a tax deducted at FDR investment, whether this was claimed by the entity or not. The auditor is required to cross check that. Till now, we have covered the revenue part on the charitable institution, and now we are moving on the expenditure part. So auditor is required to vouch the payment of grant. We have checked in the income part that charitable institutions are given the financial assistance from the local authority or other government also. So now what is the responsibility of auditor? Vouch the payment of grant. Also verify that the grants have been paid only for the charitable purpose. Whatever grant has been received by the charitable institution that has been expended, utilized for the purpose of the charitable charity falling within the purview of the objects that we have in the morning. We already covered what can be the object for preserving the environment, for education, for hospitals, medical relief. There are so many objects. So whatever the object for that particular entity, that grant must be utilized for this purpose only. I am reading it again. What is the auditor's responsibility for the expenditure part? Auditor is required to vouch the payment of grant. Also verify that the grant have been paid only for a charitable purpose or the purpose falling within the purview of the object for which the charitable institutions has been set up, and no personal benefit has been gained by the trustee. No trustee, director, member, managing committee has benefited from the either directly or indirectly. That amount received by way of grant is only being utilized for the charitable purpose, and not specifically, auditor will pay attention that no trustee, managing committee, or director is taking advantage from this grant amount. This is the special consideration to be noted by the auditor in the case of expenditure point, that no trustee, director, member of the managing committee has benefited therefrom directly or indirectly. That grant amount must be utilized only for the object, charitable object of that particular entity. The next point, we are reading the expenditure, the verifying the schedules of the security held. Just a minute. Verify the schedules of the securities held. How many types? Is there any bonds, shares, or in other investment? So as well as the inventories of the properties, both movable, immovable. How many shops? How many offices? In any properties are there? By inspecting the securities, already cleared in the last session. Inspecting means देखना with the certificates. Was there any FDR certificate or bonds certificate, share certificate? So inspecting with cross check with the particular certificate issued for that investment. The security is inspecting the securities and the title deeds. In case of property, there is a word used, the title deeds for that particular registries. In other layman's language, that is called the registries. So in case of other investment, so auditor is required to inspect the securities with their respective certificates. And in case of immovable properties, the word is used, the title deeds, that means registries. And by the physical verification of movable property, in case of inventory or other movable property, the auditor is required to physically verify the same. There are 3 points covered. First, in case of securities. Second, in case of immovable property. Third, in case of movable property. So auditor is required to check whether all investment have been done properly or not. And auditor is required to physically verify the same. Is it clear? There is a separate disclosure, Srinivasan, separate, but here the second point is talking about how the auditor will check that in whether the expenditure, or you can say investment in the form of securities like FDR, bonds, shares, then how the auditor will check the same. If any property, immovable property is being purchased by the charitable institution, then how this is to be done. And in case of other movable, then auditor is required to physically verify that movable property and the immovable property as well. So these are the point we are covering. The third, verifying the cash and bank payments. This is the obvious point. How these are being made, proper authorization or not, and cross check with the bank reconciliations and other the receipts, authorization, sanctioning authority, etc. Second, third, the next point. Any fund contributed for the special, again, this is the point covered with the uh, donation. There can be 3 types of donations: voluntary, specific, and anonymous. So this point is in that context. Ascertain that any funds contributed for special purpose, that means here we are talking about the special donations. Link it with the previous terms whichever we have learned till now. Ascertain that the any fund contributed for the special purpose have been utilized for the same purpose. Here we are talking about the special donation. Is it clear? Here we are talking about the special donations. So auditor is required to check if there was any donation given by a specific purpose. For example, one person has given that I am donating you 2 lakhs rupees for the purchasing of books for the library. 2 lakh rupees with a particular instructions that you charitable institutions are required to utilize these 2 lakhs rupees only for the purchasing the books for that library. So auditor will cross check whether these 2 lakhs rupees was utilized only for that specific purpose only and not for any other general purpose. Is it clear? These are basically payments. Whatever the payments have been made for purchasing the immovable property, for purchasing the movable properties, for expenditure on the securities, these are the basically other payments. Is it clear, Anmol? This was till now general points charitable institutions may. Then first in revenue part there was the subscriptions and donations. Then the official first the subscription part, the other was one official receipts. Then this was the graphical presentation of the subscription and donation parts. Then legacies, grants, investment income, rent, special functions, income tax refund. Here we will be considering the TDS, whether this was claimed by the filing the ITR. In practically, TDS is claimed by filing the income tax refund of that particular entity, whether this return was filed or not, whether those deducted TDS was claimed back by the entity or not. And the last part was the expenditure. Now, is it clear till now? Okay, okay, Anmol. Now we are moving to the another specific audit of the educational institutions. Like we have covered, firstly, we bifurcated the charitable institutions into three provisions. Then yesterday we covered the hospitals that also falls under the charitable definition. Now we are taking the another object which is governed by the charitable purpose, that is the audit of the educational institutions. How the audit of educational institution can be schools, colleges and universities. Is it clear? This can be in form of school, colleges and universities. So what comes to you in basic when we talk about the education audit of the educational entities, schools, colleges? What comes to your mind first of all when we talk about the education institutions? Tell me, answer. Okay, Jay. Okay. There could be fees. Okay. So, if we talk about the audit of the educational institution, there could be first point about the fees. Fees can be monthly fees, advance fees, admission fees, and other hostel fees. These are the basically parts of the various types of fees which are collected by the educational institutions. Monthly fees, advance fees, admission fees, and hostel fees. And other in the form of fine or other receipts could be in the form of fine or late payment which is received by from the students by the yes grant. Sangeeta, perfect. And rental income and endowments. Endowments are basically specific purpose donations. Those are invested in a particular safe securities. Those are called the endowments in simple terms. Endowments, specific purpose donations. And legacies, amount donated by way of will, and again interest income and dividend income in the investment section, and grant as already. Yes, perfect, Bhumika. In the expenditure payment section, we will be considering the salary of the teaching staff and all. Yes. Fees, student fees, perfect, perfect. Now we are hostel charges, mess, canteen, perfect, Rohan. Now what about the expenditure part? Now we will be covering about salary, provident fund. Provident fund is basically contribution given by the institution and as well as deducted from the salary part of the, I'm just giving a brief idea about the provident fund. A portion deducted from the salary and also contributed by the institution, and these funds are invested in the safe securities by the by that particular institutions. Endowment, Hemant Kumar means specific purpose donation. I will be covering with the example, but for now you can consider it as in a special function donation with a particular object that this amount will be utilized for this purpose only. I will be covering with the example. So these particular amount that is deducted from the salary as well as contributed by the institution, these are invested in safe securities. Those are called the provident fund. This is the expenditure for the educational institution. And the donation parts, the capital expenditure, for example, any room or any other constructions in the institution, those will be considered as capital expenditure. Establishment expenses, any administration, repair, maintenance, other expenses will be covered under this. So we are moving forward on the same. So the first part, fees from students. General aspects we have already covered. Now we will be focusing only the points from the auditor's point of view. Those are the special consideration. I am repeating these words again and again so that you can focus on the main object of learning this topic, or what the special consideration auditor will place while doing the audit of a particular organization entity. Presently, we are studying the educational institutions. The entity is educational institution. So the income part will be the fees from the students. Fees from the students. Check the name entered in the school fees register. The first part, auditor will ask for the total fees register, in which all the list of the students, overall school, this is given. Okay. So auditor is required to obtain the student fees register for each month or term, whatever as per the case, and respective class. He will cross check with the respective class register. Firstly, auditor will obtain the student fees register. He will cross-check with the respective class 1 to 10, class 1 to 12, 1 to 5. He will cross-check, showing the name of the students on the roll and test. Here the test amount of fees charged. For example, for the class 1, there is a particular fees assigned and whether those fees have been recovered or not. For class 2, the fees structure could be different. So auditor will cross verify with the respective class the total fees register. The auditor will cross check the student's fees register with the respective class register. For example, class 1 there is a different fees structure, class 2 there is a different fees structure. And what will auditor do after that? Verify that operates an internal check, again internal check, that the work of one person is automatically cross-checked by the another person. If there one person is there on receiving the fees part, one is collecting, one is issuing the receipt, another one is for accounting. In practically, there is all up on a banking through this. All aspects are doing through banking channels. But if there is another mode also, so auditor is required to check whether internal check was imposed over that or not, because the fees part is the major receipt part for the educational institution. The fees portion will be the major portion. This will cover the monthly fees, admission fees, hostel fees, advance fees, all these aspects. Another point in the fees will be check the fees received by comparing counterfoils. As I said, auditor is required to check the counterfoils, the carbon copy receipt and granted with the entries in the cash book, and whatever the fees have been received, for that receipt must have been issued. The auditor is required to tally that carbon copy receipt with the entries in the accounts books, in the cash book, and tracing the collection in the fees register. For example, there was a, for test checking, auditor took the A student was in class second and he was required to do to submit 10,000 rupees fees, whether he has submitted or not. So he will check with the, first of all he will check the name from the student fees register. He will check from the class register what is the fees structure for the same second step. Third, he will check whether what the amount was due on this A student and whether this was received by the institute or not. If received, whether this was recorded in the books of accounts of the institution. So these are the steps auditor is required to check and to confirm that the revenue from this source has been accounted for. Is it clear? Correlate with the practical examples. Student A, from the student's fees register, from the class register, auditor will gain the structure from for particular class fees register. Then what was the amount due, whether collected, if yes, whether accounted accordingly or not. The third point will be the advance fees. If any fees paid in advance, total of the various column of the fees register. Again, this fees register here we are talking about for each month, and check ascertain the fees paid in advance. For example, one student has paid the overall term per annum fees in advance. So how the treatment has been done in the books of accounts. And if one student has paid in advance, and what about the other if some are haven't given? For example, here 10,000 were due from A student, but he hasn't paid yet. So this be considered irrecoverable so that we can write it off, or this student can pay after the reminders. So this is the auditor will ask from the management. About the advance fees, auditor will check the fees paid in advance has been carried forward, because this does not pertain to particular time period. This is for the coming period. So whether this is carry forward accordingly, and the areas means which are not, which there is a possibility that these won't be recovered by the institution, and irrecoverable have been written off. These are considered and accounted as a bad debt. The auditor is required to check. And if this is irrecoverable and written off, whether this was written off after the sanctioning of the appropriate authority or not. If some fees, for example, Mr. A student is not able to pay the 10,000 fees, now the management considered the irrecoverable 10,000 is not going to be recovered by the institution. So whether this amount has been written off, if yes, so was this written off after the sanctioning of the appropriate authority or not? Fourth point will be check the admission fees. Admission fees, you all know, on the time of admission, the school or college or university charge the admission fees. This is considered as the one-time payment. So this need to be transferred. Check the admission fees with the admission slips signed. Admission, there are application form on the time of admission. So auditor is required to cross check with the admission slip or the admission form signed by the head of the institution, like principal or dean, etc. Confirm that the amount, now read carefully. Students pay attention here. Students pay attention here. Confirm what is the special consideration while checking the admission fees. Confirm that the amount has been credited to capital fund. As I said, this is considered as the one time payment. So has been this admission fees amount transferred to capital fund, unless the management committee has taken a decision to contrary means other than this treatment. If management committee decided to treat it differently, so auditor will check whether that treatments were correct or not. Fifth point, see the free studentship concessions. If there is a waiver of fees, concessions given, so was there authorized given by the authorized person or not? Auditor is required to check that. Fines and late payment have been collected and remitted under proper authority. Hostel dues, as you already said in your answer. Hostel dues are also there. Some students are residing near the in the campus of the college or the school. So what about the hostel fees? So auditor is required to cross check the hostel dues also recovered before the student's accounts was closed. For example, there was a 3-year course, and the student was residing in the campus of the hostel. So what about that due fees that was due in that student's behalf? Was this cleared or not? Caution money. What is the meaning of caution money? Refunded or not? Here in the 7th point, confirm that the hostel dues were recovered before the students' accounts were closed. The session has been closed. The course is completed. Now the students is going. So management is required to check what is the dues, whether these dues were cleared or not. And this is what about the caution money? What is the meaning of caution money here? What is the meaning of caution money? Yes, Hemrata, auditor will apply all the necessary steps which he will consider. He will apply additional audit procedure also to acquire the evidence. If he is not satisfied during the course of audit, he needs some other additional audit evidence also. He needs some more clarification, explanation. He can extend his audit procedure accordingly. Clear, Hemlata? So, caution money is basically security. Perfect. Jay, Shankar and Shubham perfectly answered. These are the security money. For example, one student took the admission in the hostel and the school. He submitted 10,000 rupees as security money on the behalf of any negligence, non-payment of dues, etc. So these institutions take some security money so that they can adjust it in case of non-payment later on. So this is the caution money, security money. So whether this was refunded or adjusted accordingly or not. If the student paid all its dues, if the A student has paid all his dues accordingly, properly, so this must be refunded back to the student. If, for example, a student, there is a 5,000 dues on behalf of A, 5,000 has not been paid till now. So the institution will deduct 5,000 from this security money and refund the only 5,000 to the student. Is it clear? Yes, required to be deposited by the student. Devraj, caution money, there are two aspects. Is it refundable, non-refundable? Depend upon the case. Basically, security money, if in case there is a due on the last of the term or the tenancy, then that amount of due can be adjusted from this security money. The other another part is other receipts and grants and donations. Many institutions, educational institutions receive grant, financial assistance. So what is the auditor's responsibility on the same and what is the other receipts also? So verify the rental income from the landed property with the rent roll. Obviously, auditor will check how many properties of that particular education institution has given on rent. The auditor will get the knowledge about these properties from the rent register, rent roll, from the rent register. There are 5 property or 3 properties given on rent. So auditor will check whether all rent received from these property have been properly accounted or not. The second point will be vouch the income from the endowments and legacies. Legacies amount donated by way of will, wasiyatnama, as well as the interest and dividend from the investment. Also inspect the securities. Inspect means to checking with the certificate. Anirudh, we will be discussing, as we have already done in the previous session, how the questions will be asked in the question in the exam, and we are required to answer accordingly. Some of the questions we have already discussed, and some we will be discussing in the next session. Clear, Anirudh? So inspection means to check with the particular certificate. Verify the government local authority grant with the memo. Memo means a letter receipt, a receipt uh, explaining the amount, defining the amount, what amount has been received as grant. So verify the government and local authority grant with the memo. Whatever the letter received, there is a letter received with along with the grant that this much amount has been given as grant to this institution. This is for this purpose. If there is any specific purpose, or is this for the voluntary as financial assistance to this institution? So this is called the memo, a letter of grant along with the grant given. If any expenses have been disallowed for the purpose of the grant is, and as I said, if there is a specific purpose grant, then that purpose should be, that amount should be utilized for that purpose only, specific purpose. If it is voluntary, then it can be used for any other purpose. Endowment I will be covering in assets portion. Now the expenditure part. Verify the provident fund money. I already explained to you in the starting slide. Provident fund money of the staff have been invested in the appropriate security, because this is the money deducted from the salary of the staff as well as the institution. Legacies, Devraj, legacies means amount donated by way of will, wasiyatnama. if I want to donate my property after I will die, so there is a called the legacy. I want to donate my this property after my dying on to this institution. This is called the legacy. Amount donated by way of a will, wasiyatnama. Is it clear, Devraj? So this is the money of the salary, and this is the money deducted from the salary of the staff, and as well as a contribution, a particular percentage contribution is also being made on the behalf of institution. So this amount must be invested in the safe investment, in the safe investment. So auditor is required to check, verify that the provident fund money have been invested in the appropriate securities, so that there is on the maturity of the same, there is not loss of the amount. So auditor is required to cross check the amount have been invested in the safe investment mode only. There is not invested any risky mode. Second point, vouch the donations with the list published, already covered in the previous section. There is a list. Auditor is required to ask for the list with the annual report. If some donations were a specific purpose already covered, money was utilized for specific purpose, vouch all the capital expenditure like construction a new room or particular section, particular hall in the institutions. So that will be covered under the capital expenditure. Now, what is the responsibility for auditor for the same? So auditor is required to vouch all capital expenditure in usual way and verify the same with the sanction. If there was a constructions of two new rooms, those constructions were after sanctioning of a committee and those were recorded in the minutes books. Obviously, we have already covered all the major decisions, significant decisions, if you remember, in the case of partnership deed, all the significant decisions taken during the meetings, those are recorded in the minutes books. So auditor is required to check those. Fourth point, vouch in a usual manner all establishment in other administration expenses and inquiry unduly heavy expenditure. If on a particular activity there was required to there was a common expense was 10,000 but actually expended 20,000. So what was the reason for the same? If any unduly heavy expenditure under any head, for example, repair and maintenance, there was only need for the 10,000. The approx amount which was required to be expended was 10,000, but the actually expended was 20,000 or 30,000. Then what was the reason for the same? And an annual budget, if you have already covered in your costing, there is a budget is being prepared by the particular entity to check whether they are completing their objective, pre-decided objective or not. So auditor is required to check is there if there was any annual budget prepared, see any excess under any head. For example, the same example you can take for repair maintenance, there was a section authorization budget for 10,000 but they actually expended 20,000. So this is the variation, and was that variation duly sanctioned? Whatever words I have highlighted in bold and it underlined, those are important consideration for auditing point of view. If there was any budget prepared, listen again, students. If there was any budget prepared, then what is the auditor's responsibility? See any excess under any head. Like in our example, repair and maintenance, the budget was maintained for 10,000, but actually expended was 20,000. And what was duly sanctioned by the managing committee was excess 10,000, what actually expended. Was this expense, extra expense, was duly sanctioned by the managing committee or not? If not, now next step. If not sanctioned by the proper authority, then what? Bring it to the committee's notice in your report. In your report means in the audit report. Again, listen, students, carefully. There was a budget for the an educational institution. In that budget, there was a repair maintenance budgeted amount of 10,000, but actually expended 20,000. This excess, and first step for auditor will be to check the budget and the excess 10,000 which have been expended in actually from the budget, was this amount properly sanctioned or not? If yes, then it is okay. If not, bring it to the committee's notice in the auditor's report. The next point, increase in the salary. Earlier we were paying 20,000 to particular employee. Now this is have been increased to the 30,000 or 35,000. So whatever the increase in the salary have been sanctioned and the minuted in the committee. Assets and liability portion. Any heavy old areas like in case of fees we have covered and we have took the example of a student. A didn't pay the 10,000 rupees fees which was due on his behalf, so this would be considered as arrears. So report auditor is required to report on the same, any arrears on accounts of fees. Dormitory rents means their beds are kept in the particular big room. Big room is there and so many beds are kept there, so those are called the dormitory rooms. So if there is any dormitory rooms, so room and rent has been collected or not, so auditor is required to report on the same. Second point will be caution money covered under security deposit. Confirm now what is the responsibility of auditor. Listen carefully, students. Confirm that the caution money and other deposits, if any taken by the institution by the students on the admission, have been shown as liability because these are refundable. As we took in our previous example, 10,000 was taken as security deposit and this was refundable. Institution was bound to refund it to that particular student. So this will be shown as the liability because this is not the revenue part of the education institution. This is the refundable part. So this will be considered as the liability. So auditor is required to check whatever the security deposit caution money has been received from the students by the education institution have been shown as liability in the balance sheet. Clear till now? And not transferred to revenue. Obviously, this is liability unless these are not refundable. In the starting, we have to check the condition whether security deposits, caution monies are refundable or not refundable. If refundable, then it will be considered as the liability section. If not refundable, then it will be considered as the revenue section. Most important point, technical point of view. From the technical accounting point of view. Managing committee means remuneration committee? No. The persons who are managing the overall activities of the educational institutions, the management. In common sense, in common word, this is the management, overall aspects of the management of the institution. Third point, see the investment representing. Yes, now it is come, the endowment fund. Read it carefully. See that the investment presenting the endowments fund for the prices. Now, what I told you in the earlier slide, endowment, consider the endowment fund as the specific fund for a particular purpose. That is called the, and pay attention here, all please. If it is not refundable, Santosh, then it will be added to the revenue part. We are not supposed to, education institution is not supposed to return, then educational institution is required to book it as a revenue. Obviously, if it is refundable, then liability section. If it's not refundable, then revenue section. It is the revenue for the institution. Now, please pay attention here. Endowment fund. Endowment fund are the specific donations given for a specific purpose. Now, read it. See that the investments representing the endowment fund for prices. Now, what is the specific purpose here? For prices. There are funds given. The example, 1 lakh rupees. Let me clear it. Just say example. Pay attention, students here. There was a 1 lakh rupees amount received as endowment fund for the prizes. The special purpose will be for distributing the prizes. Are kept separate. Okay, we have an institution has kept these Separate because these are for the specific purpose. These are only for the distribution of the prizes. And any income in excess of the prizes, the amount was 1 lakh. Now the institute will not keep it with in the safe, in the locker. Institution will invest it till the time prizes distributed. The institution will invest. For example, institute invested at the rate 5% per annum. Institute invested this 1 lakh received for endowment fund for the distribution of prizes, invested at the rate 5%, and the amount become 1 lakh, 5 lakh at the end of the year. Now read it. What the point is saying. Income in excess of the prizes. What will be the excess income? 5,000 rupees has been accumulated, has been added to the 1 lakh rupees. Now it become 1 lakh, 5 lakh and invested along with the corpus. Now the total fund available for the endowment fund available for the distribution of prizes will be 1 lakh 5,000 rupees, and excess fund will be invested along with the corpus. Whatever the actual amount was there, now the endowment fund will be total considered as the 1 lakh 5 lakh. Santosh, after doing any surgery or any kind of operation, means I didn't get your question. The next point is ascertain the system of ordering in case any books or any clothing have been issued by the school to the students. So what about the an auditor is required to check the proper process. What is the system for ordering, inspection, receipt and issue of the provision. If any canteen has been managed by the school, if any uniforms have been given by the school, clear, and other equipment if efficient, all bills are whatever the expenditure has been made by the educational institution, those are only after the proper authorization. Fifth point, inventory of stationery, clothing like uniform, provisions, all equipments, this should be checked with the inventory register. We have already read so many register: investment register, patient register, members register, so rent register, the inventory register. So auditor is required to cross check with the reference to the inventory register corresponding the inventory of the previous year, and values applied to the various items should be test checked. The opening balance of inventory was this. In current year we purchased this amount and we used this amount. Now what should be the closing value of that particular inventory, and auditor is required to test check and even physically verify the stock of the same. Clear? Compliances part. Confirm that the refund of taxes already covered. If any TDS is deducted, if any TDS amount is deducted from the income of investment, like in our example on the FDR, interest on the FDR, so whether this amount has been claimed and how practically it is claimed by filing the income tax return and recovered. Since the institutions are generally exempted from payment of the income tax, these institutions are not required to pay tax. But if any TDS has been deducted, so institutions are required to file their income tax return and claim the same. They are required to check on the income tax portal and cross check with the amount to be claimed. Finally, verify the annual statements of accounts. While doing so, the separate provision. What are the provisions required to be made by the institution, like provident fund, hostel or games fund, poor boy fund for the concessions or the waiver of the fees. So auditor is required to cross check whether all these, auditor is required to check the annual statements whether all these provisions which are required to be made by the institutions have been made accordingly. Is it clear till now? Okay, Jay. Now we are moving. Is it clear till now? We have covered the general aspects in the trust and the societies, and after that charitable institutions part, and next was the educational institution, income, assets, liability, compliances, expenditure, revenue part, general parts as well. Now we are moving to audit of cinemas. What the auditor will check, first of all, what are the general points? Is it clear till now, students? Okay. The audit of the cinemas. The receipt part. First of all, auditor will check what could be the receipts by the sale of tickets, the major revenue by the sale of ticket, restaurant income. There is a restaurant section in the cinemas. So auditor is required to check the income. Is it rented or is it owned by the cinemas? You are required as an auditor, you are required to check whether the restaurant what is which is running in the cinemas. Yes, Gaurav, I will be closing this session just by ending this. This is the small topic audit of cinema. Is it okay? This small topic audit of cinemas. Then we will be taking the queries in this next sessions. Okay, okay, Jay, Sangeeta. Small topic. I am taking. Therefore, I am taking a small topic audit of cinemas, and you will be all students will be easily able to understand because we all have visited the cinema so many times. So we are aware. If not, if you haven't observed the system of cinema, then the read this topic and next time whenever you visit the cinema, then think and observe as an auditor's point of view so that you can retain as well this topic. Yes, every topic you have to be learned. So the next is the restaurant income. The restaurant is being owned by the cinema hall or is it given on the rental basis? The auditor is required to check the agreement. The third income can be in the form of advertisement. If you have seen the advertisement that has been uh, shown on the theaters and in the form of banners and slides, whatever is being presented or kept on the cinema halls, these are the major points of income revenue. Payment tax on tax like GST, whatever GST amount has been collected, this is required to be paid to authorities. This is the payment section. Expenses on the advertisement, like I said, if any banner, any slides, any shots has been placed in the cinema halls, so the expenses on that and depreciation on the fixed assets part. Now we are moving to the actual auditing aspect. Verify the internal control. What was the internal control meaning? All the processes implemented, designed and maintained by the management to get the reasonable assurance that the overall objective of the entity is attained. All the processes are called the internal control to get the reasonable assurance. So what could be the internal control in the case of cinemas? We are studying here till these points. So the points could be entrance, how the entrance is given in the cinema hall with the ticket or without the ticket. We all have visited the cinema, correlate with that. Entrance, how the entrance has been given during the show is only through the printed tickets. These should be serially numbered, obviously, and bound into the books that the number of the tickets issued for each show and each class, gold, platinum, other classes are different. Read it again. The number of the ticket issued for each show and class are different. Each show in morning show, evening show. So this can be the show and what class, platinum class, gold class. So number should be different. Though the number of the same class for the show. Same class means platinum class. And for example, there is a platinum class shows in the morning and in the evening as well in the same day. On the Sunday, there in the morning there was a platinum class shows and in the evening also there is a platinum class shows. So this must be run serially in if in for example in a morning session platinum class tickets were sold from 1 to 50, that in the evening session that should be started from the 51 for the particular platinum class shows. And the next is advance booking. And if any advance booking has been made, then separate series of ticket is issued and inventory of tickets is kept in the safe custody, obviously, because this is the major portion. So what is this? We are learning the internal control because the tickets, understand students, tickets are the major revenue part for the cinema. So major parts. So what the process, what the implement and what the designs, what the mechanism, what is the mechanism implemented, designed by the management to control this revenue part so that there is no leakage of revenue. No person can enter into the cinema hall without the ticket. There is a proper mechanism for advance booking. So this can be controlled only by the maintaining, designing the internal proper robust working internal control mechanism. The second point will be the statements of tickets sold. For example, in the morning session, there was a total 200 tickets sold. So an auditor is required to cross-check with the statements of tickets sold and how much amount was collected. Here, the cash collected also include the online amount received. For example, 200 tickets were sold, so amount also should be received for the 200 tickets. So auditor is required to cross-check. Third point, verify that the record is kept. Proper record is kept for the free passes. If you have applied some coupon and get the free passes for particular movie, then how the record is being kept by the cinema halls. And these are issued under the proper authority. Auditor is required to verify the same. Students, can understand carefully one point here. Auditor is not required to perform these tasks. Auditor is required to verify, reconfirm, apply audit procedure whether these tasks has been done properly by the that entity or not. Auditor is required to verify that the records are kept for free passes or not, and who was then these passes are only being issued after the proper authority, under the proper authority. Auditor will verify the same. Auditor will not prepare the statements of tickets sold. That is to be prepared by the cinema hall management or the workers. But auditor is required to confirm the same. The fourth point, vouch the entries in the cash book in respect of cash collected or the amount collected on the sale of ticket, different show, morning show, evening show, on the daily statement, whatever is prepared by the cinema hall members. Clear? Reconcile the amount. Important GST, whatever auditor, taxation point of view, compliance part, whatever GST has been collected on the sale of ticket, that has to be paid. This is not the part of revenue of the cinema hall. That is to be paid to the revenue authority, to the GST department by the filing the income tax GST returns on the site. So reconcile the amount of tax collected with the total number of ticket issued and vouch and verify the tax return filed for each month. Auditor is required to check on the portal. He can also check on the portal, online portal, whatever GST has been collected. Most important point from the auditing point of view. Whatever the GST has been collected on the sale of ticket, that must be deposited by filing the GST returns. Sixth point, verify the charges collected for the advertisement, whatever this advertisement is being made on the screen, or whatever the banners or slides are being kept at the cinema halls. So what is the agreement with that particular person for the advertising? And verify the charges collected for the advertisement slides and shots by the reference to the register of the slides. How many advertisements cinema hall is doing and how the amount is collected, what is the agreement with that person for showing this advertisement on the slides and by the banners, keeping the banners at the cinema halls. So what is the agreement among them? Auditor is required to check the register of the advertisement for the same. Seventh point will be expenditure incurred, like I said, for the banners or other aspect also for advertising the in the cinema halls, and repair maintenance required on the property or on the other assets like chairs or other. So this is required to be checked by the auditor. No part of such expenditure should be capitalized. You have, if you have covered in your accounting aspect, if it is adding the value, then it will be capitalized. If it is not adding value to particular asset, then it will be considered as the repair and maintenance part. So auditor need to consider this aspect, whether this expenditure classified as the revenue or the capital expenditure, and accounted accordingly. If not, auditor will tell them. Confirm the amount of depreciation on the machinery and furnitures have been charged at appropriate rate. This will cover under the recalculation part. Auditor will recalculate the depreciation that has been charged by the cinema halls. Vouch the payment of the amount of the film hire. with the bills of distributors. Now, what is the meaning of this? If you know, the films have been made by the producers, and those producers again transfer these rights of the film to the distributors. Now, this distributors deals with the cinema halls, owner of the cinema halls, to show these movies in their theaters, in their halls. So, this is the proper process. Producers gave to distributors, then distributors deal with the cinema halls to show the movies. So vouch the payment of the amount of account of the film hire with the bills of the distributor, and in the process the agreement. What is the agreement between the distributor and cinema hall? What percentage has been decided between them? So cinema hall owner will give a particular lump sum amount to distributor before the film has been run, and after that distributor will give a particular percentage as per the agreement between them. So auditor is required to check what was the agreement, what was the rate fixed on this behalf. And next point, examine the unadjusted balance out of the advance paid to the distributor. 1 lakh was paid by cinema hall owner to the distributor for running the particular movie in their theater, and those against the film hire the contract to see that they are good and recoverable. If any film in respect of which an advance was paid, cinema hall has paid 1 lakh rupees for the amount for the movie X, say, and the advance already, the cinema hall owner already paid the advance to the distributor, and that particular X film is already run in the cinemas, then what is the duty? And that amount has still not adjusted by the cinema hall owner. Class will be continued for 5 to 10 minutes more. Prabir. So auditor is required to check why there is unadjusted balance. Is it clear? If any film in this respect, in our example film X, which on the advance was paid, 1 lakh was paid, has already been run हो चुकी है, cinema hall में आ चुकी है वो. It should be inquired. Auditor will inquiry if the film X has already been run in your cinema halls, then why still the amount is being kept as shown as unadjusted. The auditor will inquire the same. The management should be asked to make the provision. If cinema hall management decide that this amount will not be recoverable, then the auditor will report accordingly and ask the management of the cinema hall to make the provision for the same. The 11th point, the arrangement for the collection of the share. As I already told you in the previous slide, restaurant income can be in the two sense: if restaurant is owned by the cinema, or it is given on the rental basis. So 11 point will cover two aspects. The arrangement of the collection of the share in the restaurant income should be inquired into. Is it on the rental basis for the fixed sum or percentage, or receivable annually? For example, there is a restaurant in the cinema, and the cinema hall management decided that the restaurant person will give him 1 lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees annually or monthly, as the case may be, and the can only be run by that person and not by the cinema hall. Cinema hall management will only receive a fixed percentage or fixed sum on a particular time, say annually. And in case, second aspect can be, restaurant can be run directly by the cinema. The restaurant will be owned by the cinema. That in that case, auditor will check. The auditor should cover the sale of various items, whatever the food stuffs, when inventory has been kept for cold drinks or the food inventory. The auditor will check accordingly how this food is purchasing, how the sale is being made. Clear? So this is till now. Thank you so much for giving your extra time. I hope it is clear till now, you all. This is all till today's section. Clear, students? Till now, you are required to read from the study material And if any doubts, we will be covering in the next session. Thank you.